Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to talk about something that is actually spurred by a comment that was on yesterday's video regarding special characters, or named characters at least. Before we go into that though, I want to just do a very quick update on the competition, because people have been asking about it. I left things intentionally vague in terms of when the winner would be announced because of the imminent arrival of my daughter Cara, who is now with us, but it did mean that the last week or so has been kind of hectic and a bit rushed and a bit weird. But I said that I would announce the winner by the end of the week, and so I am. There will be another video directly saying who the winner is, and just a general thank you for entering and everything. But the winner has been decided. They will have a week to actually get back in touch with me so that I can send them the stuff. If within that week I hear nothing and I just get radio silence, then a second winner will be picked. So just in case you don't see the other video, I'm just throwing that out there. Now, the video itself. Named characters. Now, this has come about because someone commented on yesterday's video and said that whilst they liked the Dark Eldar Codex, there were 7 named characters of Dark Eldar, and now there are significantly less. It's down to 3. And Vect himself just doesn't have rules. He is not a usable, playable character on the battlefield. And for me, named characters are kind of weird in 40k. On the one hand, I can absolutely see why you would be upset that named characters disappear. I think if something has been in the game as a significant enough character to have rules, simply removing that is not great. I don't think that's the right way to go about things. Just not making rules for that character, just not updating that character to be playable in newer codexes, I don't think that's particularly appropriate. I think if you're going to place that much stock in that particular character, in that particular narrative, then that should be continued wherever possible. Now, Games Workshop have said that, stuff that they don't have models for, that is stuff that you're not going to find rules for, which is one possible explanation for characters disappearing, because quite a few characters just didn't have models. That being said, that's not an accurate statement from Games Workshop to begin with, because there are units that don't have models, but that do have rules that, in fact, didn't exist before 8th. Like a Grand Master in Dread Knight for the Grey Knights was not something that you could use before 8th, I don't believe. It wasn't in their 7th edition codex, and there's no model for it. And yet there are rules for it, and there was an entire article in White Dwarf talking about how to convert a normal Dread Knight into a Grand Master in Dread Knight. Which, let's face it, goes against the whole there's no model for it, therefore there's no rules for it. That's what led to the disappearance of specific options for things like Honor Guard, for bloody Khan, like not having a bike, stuff like that. It's an irritating double standard. And I think what it boils down to is a weird kind of confusion from Games Workshop on certain things. I'm of the opinion that if you've got a named character, and that named character was important enough to warrant having its own model, or at least having its own rules in the past, unless you are going to do something to write that character out of current lore, unless you're going to do something to make that character less significant or explain their absence, you should just keep the rules for them. I don't believe it really takes that much effort in the grand scheme of writing a codex to update character profiles. Like I realise I don't make codexes, I don't test rules. Well, not for Warhammer. I think I've used Unearthed Arcana stuff for D&D more than I've actually used just normal characters at this point, but it's kind of, I struggle to believe that if you are updating every single unit in a codex, it's too much trouble to just update the rule set for a character. I don't think that stuff needs to change all that much, especially if they're in a good place to begin with. And to be honest, making a character a similar cost to an existing HQ choice is also a possibility. This is something else where I don't quite understand the philosophy behind removing special characters when, lazy though it might be, and although it might cause a bit of a fuss, you could simply take an equivalent HQ or equivalent other model and kind of port the rules over. That is a possible solution. If you're looking at it in terms of, well, there's no model for this, do we want to waste the time actually making a rule set for it? Cheap though it is, porting the rules over, restricting the weapons, or giving them weapons that are better than you would get on the equivalent non-named character for a slight points increase, I think that's an okay compromise. I think the biggest problem that I have is this weird kit bashing thing, and we've talked about the kit bashing stuff before, because the only way to get some of these characters was to make them yourself, and for a long time that wasn't an issue. That wasn't a problem. That was something that was, I think, encouraged by a lot of the community, and still is. It's only Games Workshop that seems to have taken a kind of weird, ambiguous stance to it. On the one hand, we don't produce models for this, therefore there are no rules for it. Therefore, if you wanted to make this unit, well, you can't use them anymore. You'd have to kit bash it, and we don't want people to get confused with having to do that, so we got rid of it. On the other hand, here's a brand new codex. Here is a model that doesn't exist, and here are the rules for that model that doesn't exist. I wonder if part of it is down to a lack of coherence, in a way. If you have a named character that doesn't have a model, and you have people who want to play that named character on the battlefield, but there is no Games Workshop produced model for it, that person has to go and they have to make it themselves. They have to kit bash it. They have to buy different bits from different boxes, slap it all together, and produce that character on their own. Now, the only thing that I can think that would affect Games Workshop's decision to stop doing this is if they didn't want that kind of, I guess, divergence of design. They didn't want people to come up with their own vision of what these characters look like, what these characters sort of had going on in terms of physical appearance. That, of course, could be combated by actually making the characters themselves, or indeed by doing what they did with the Grey Knight Grandmaster in Dread Knight, which is, say, here is a great way to convert this character. To be honest, if I was in any sort of position of authority, which of course I'm not, I'm just an idiot with a webcam and a microphone, I would lean far more heavily towards not removing the rules for units that don't have models, like not removing the rules for special characters or even just normal units that don't have models. Instead, I would take the Grey Knight approach for everything. Here is the new codex, here are the models in this codex. You will note there's no model for this particular unit. So, look at this month's White Dwarf for how to convert that character. Look at this month's White Dwarf for how to convert stuff into that unit. Doing that kind of thing, I think, shows more support for the characters and units themselves, and also, I think, shows more support for the community as a whole. Not everyone is into kit bashing. Not everyone is into making their own interpretation of what a character might look like, what a Grandmaster might look like. But that doesn't mean that those are the only people that you should cater to. That doesn't mean that those are the only people who should get a say. The key with everything, especially stuff as personal as Warhammer 40k, is options. So provide the rules. Provide the rules for special characters, provide the rules for named characters for stuff that there is no model for. If people don't want to use those, then they don't have to. There are other units for them to use. It's not like there is any army out there that only has a named character as an HQ choice. There is always another choice. For those people who do want to use those, then provide them with a Games Workshop sanctioned way of building them. Provide them with a Games Workshop recommended parts list. Provide the facility for creating these characters. I mean, things like bit sellers are pretty damn popular. There's several of them in the UK, and if you go on eBay, you can find pretty much any part from any kit with a bit of hunting. That is something that I don't think Games Workshop necessarily strictly has to tap into. But I really think that you wouldn't do too bad if you actually provided the components for like the official Games Workshop kit bash for Vect, for instance. You know, you get the body of this, you get the arms from this, and you get a couple of head options. I wonder if there isn't an element of Games Workshop kind of underestimating just how much people want to not just use special characters, but also just how much people want to create them themselves. I mean, we have already models for significant characters for both Space Wolves, Space Marines, Dark Angels. You know, there's a lot of Space Marine special characters out there. And yet, I'd say easily a couple of times a week, I see someone posting a kit bash of a character that you can already buy a model for. It's like, you can already go and buy Arjak Rockfist, you can already go and buy Belial, and yet, the number of times I see people posting a kit bash saying, this is my kit bash version of this character. They could have just bought the model, but they didn't want to, they wanted to create their own thing. Really, I don't see why special characters should be removed because they don't have models. I think the rules should always be available. I think it should always be an option. I think the option should be given to the players themselves as to whether they want to kit bash their own version, and if they don't, I think there should be something that Games Workshop does, be it through White Dwarf or even through actual pages in the codex themselves, telling people how to easily go about making these characters. Like I've said a couple of times, if that character is significant enough to have a name, if that character is significant enough to have appeared in previous codexes, and nothing has been done to change that in terms of their relative standing in their faction, don't remove them. As always, give people the choice. And perhaps you also might get more on the right side of Xenos players if you don't restrict their special characters as severely as you already are, is another point. I mean, Space Marines don't seem to have this problem, but there are a significant number of special characters that have disappeared for Xenos races. I mean, Dark Eldar is an especially bad example. To go down from 7 to 3, losing 4, that's significant. And no matter how good the codex is, something like that is always going to create a bit of a sour note, especially when it's not strictly necessary. So, yeah, I mean, someone left that comment, someone asked about that, what I thought about it. That's pretty much what I think about the whole thing with the special characters and their disappearance from the game overall. Kind of sucks. We should have the option to use them. Question is, what do you think? Do you think if it hasn't got a model it shouldn't have rules? Do you think they should just do rules for everything that they did before and then people can kit bash if they like? What do you think of the idea of an actual kind of official Games Workshop kit bash? Like an actual kind of GW approved, this is how you make this guy sort of thing. I quite like that idea. It'd be interesting to see if they could implement something like that one day. Let me know what you think in the comments below, as always. And in the meantime, there's a couple of videos for you to click, and Patreon, subscribe. Click them if you like, don't click them if you don't want to. And I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.